And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. One of the most famous of the early roads in BC was the Caribou Highway, which was built by the Royal Engineers in 1862 to 1863. Today, this route still follows the same path that 20 mule teams drove over 100 years ago. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1988.
Anybody who's done it knows that wintertime driving in the Northwest is a real mixed bag. Often the roadways are bare and dry, with the snow safely off to the sides, and driving presents no particular challenges. But sometimes winter strikes with a vengeance, covering the roads with snow or freezing ice, or both. Then driving can become downright treacherous, and scenes like these are an all too often occurrence along BC highways. After a winter storm, it's always reassuring for motorists to see the BC Department of Highways employees out doing what's necessary to make highway travel as safe as possible. Except this year, they won't be doing it. Oh sure, the familiar orange and white equipment will still be a common sight on the roads, but the employees won't be working for the government. They've got new bosses starting this year. It's all part of Premier Van der Zam's privatization scheme. On December 1st, North Coast Road Maintenance Limited took over road and bridge maintenance in the Terrace and Kitimat area. A month earlier, highways maintenance was privatized in the Smithers area, and in a few weeks, the Prince Rupert District maintenance will likely fall into private hands as well. Across BC, the government has tendered 28 private maintenance contracts involving hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of workers. The services now being done by the private instead of public sector include pavement patching, sign installation, litter control, rest area shoulder and ditch maintenance, bridge redecking and minor repairs, fence and barrier maintenance, weather and road condition reporting, emergency responses for accidents, washouts, rock slides, etc., and snow removal and de-icing. The contracts do not involve new highway construction, major improvements to existing roads, or large paving contracts. At the Terrace office of North Coast Road Maintenance, the surroundings are pretty sparse. They only got into the business at the beginning of the month, so employees are still getting their bearings on how it all works. But they're very clear on what the company's goals are.
Our mandate is to meet or exceed past highways maintenance standards, whether it be snow plowing or crack sealing or bridge washing, whatever.
The most contentious aspect of highways maintenance privatization is snow removal and de-icing. There are serious safety implications, and 2 days after North Coast took over from the ministry on December 1st, the company was put to the test.
Well, the first weekend of the contract was a good test, and I felt it went quite smoothly. We started out with heavy snow. Snow was falling very close to zero, which compacted quickly, made for slippery roads. We were addressing that need with all the equipment we could muster, hired equipment and our company equipment. And then it went to rain. We ended up with 72 millimeters of precipitation in 24 hours and some flooding problems. And then it cleared off and it all went to black ice. So it was a pretty full weekend.
Highways Ministry officials monitored the company's first effort at snow and ice removal and gave it a passing grade, saying they didn't receive any complaints from the public.
They did very well. They had quite a bit of hired equipment out on the road. They also had 8 trucks of the old ministry vehicles out there, and there were 1 or 2 minor areas where we've discussed with them where it could be done a little better, but generally we're satisfied.
The contract spelling out the conditions that must be met under privatization is immense. 9 volumes packed with stipulations and standards that cover almost every imaginable occurrence that could take place on a public roadway. Included are figures dictating minimum standards for snow removal.
Examples are snow plowing, Highway 16 West. We start plowing at 2 centimeters, and we're not meant to allow the snow to accumulate more than 4 centimeters, but obviously those have to be tempered with common sense because we can snow 25 centimeters an hour around the Salvis area. So we're using the contract documents as guidelines, but we're also tempering them all with common sense, and we're trying to provide the best public service that we can.
But what if the new private contractors are not doing an adequate job of maintaining the highways in a safe condition? What if mismanagement causes the company to collapse, or it's just not spending enough on maintenance work? Well, the government has taken steps to ensure the snowplows will be on the road when needed. The government has sold most of the highways equipment, but a core portion has only been leased to the private operators, which means the government has the option of taking it back if necessary.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. According to Trend BC website, under the heading of winter traction, the industry term is winter abrasive. The particles in this mix need to be heavy enough to stay on the road in the wind, large enough not to vanish under new snow or freezing rain, yet small enough to keep those frustrating windshield chips and paint dings to a minimum. Let us return to the archives as professional drivers respond to highway maintenance privatization.
Some of the guys, they say that once it's privatized, they figure it's going to be better.
Going to be better?
Yeah.
How did it look last weekend?
It didn't look that good.
Think it was worse than when it was the government was doing the job?
Looks like to me, yeah.
How was the roads? Just a lot of, could have used more plowing?
I think it could use a lot more sanding, maybe some more salt too, because it's pretty slippery out there the last couple of days even.
And how does that stack up with last year? A little worse, eh?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
What are some of the other fellows saying? Same thing?
They all seem to say the same thing, yeah.
Have you been hearing from some of the other truckers about how it's been going with the clearing of the roads and the sanding and that sort of thing?
Oh, just what you hear on the radio.
What have some of the guys been saying?
Oh, mixed opinion.
Mixed?
No.
Some say it's better and some say it's worse and some say it's the same.
Well, basically, yeah.
No big complaints.
Well, you just got to drive accordingly.
But between the government doing it and this new private outfit doing it, there doesn't seem to be much difference?
Oh, it's, I don't know, it's kind of too soon to tell.
It very likely is too soon to tell if there's a difference between highways maintenance now, under privatization, and highways maintenance under government operation. It's also too soon to determine the exact cost of the scheme, and from that, how much the taxpayers stand to save. And it also remains to be seen if the expected savings come at the expense of a decreased level of service out on the roadways. But the government is confident there will be financial savings for the taxpayers.
Well, the information I've got back on any of the contract awards so far is that the prices have come in lower than the maintenance budgets for previous years. Across the board, that's been the case.
Still, officials aren't saying what the contracts have cost and what the expected savings are.
There's a number of areas where negotiations are still underway. Prince Rupert, for example, and the Dease Lake area. So any information and cost information, that's confidential for now so that there's assurance that it won't affect any bidding that's still underway.
So why is it that private contractors, many with much less experience at highways maintenance than the government, can do the job for less than what it cost previously? The companies say some of the savings will come from reducing the paperwork and reorganizing the management structure to cut back on bureaucracy, something governments are always criticized for. And there are other ways the companies can cut costs by making better use of equipment and workers. For instance, the companies can bid for outside work, such as building roads and bridges for logging companies or doing private snow removal.
We can use the equipment 24 hours a day anywhere we want. So hopefully efficiency will be generated through better utilization. The highways was very structured as to where it could go and where it couldn't go with the equipment. And now we can go into the driveway plowing business, parking lots, road construction, and with better utilization, hopefully the cost savings will be there.
There may also be extra money to be made at the newly privatized highways garage facilities. In the past, the mechanics could only work on department vehicles. Now the companies have the option of taking in outside work, and the mechanics could find themselves making repairs to trucks and equipment belonging to other contractors. Predicting the cost of maintaining the highways is not a black and white matter. Some years might cost more than others. For instance, years with abnormally high amounts of snowfall will mean extra costs for the private contractors, and conversely, if there's very little snow, it'll mean reduced costs. So, to calculate the amount of money the government pays for snow removal, an averaging formula was used.
Snowfall around here is a real hit and miss thing. We have the Canadian record for 24-hour snowfall, set in 1970 at Lake Ellis Lake, 119 centimeters. So obviously if we have a big snowfall like that, we're going to run into a very high maintenance cost. And to protect us, the contract has a clause that we're working on the 10-year average at the Terrace Airport for snowfall. And if we go over that value, then we're up for negotiation.
An extra stipend of some sort.
Exactly.
And what if you go under?
Then I think the company would probably be making some money.
Whiskey Creek overflowed its banks and literally tore the highway up.
Maintenance of highways in the Northwest involves much more than clearing the roads of snow and ice. Often heavy rains create flood conditions, and the waters can cause major damage to roads, which have to be repaired. Such occurrences, of course, can't be predicted, and so contractors were concerned if there was a string of floods or rock slides that had to be attended to, it could eat up the company's profit margin. So conditions were written into the contracts to cover the costs of such situations.
Those are called sort of emergency responses, special events. And if we had that situation happen tomorrow, bridges washed out and that kind of stuff, obviously we couldn't afford to put in $6 million worth of bridges on this contract. So we are liable for the first $20,000 of flood repair, then after that it will go back to the ministry. And we're responsible for X number of events through the year. I think it would be 3.
It's going to take some time before a valid assessment can be made on the effects of the privatization of highways maintenance. With the program still in its infancy, no one can say for certain that the job is being done better or worse now that the private sector has taken over from the government. And the question remains as to whether the expected savings to the taxpayers in maintenance costs will be offset by a less than adequate performance by some contractors, which could translate into road conditions that compromise safety. There will be complaints on the job private contractors are doing, especially regarding snow removal. There was no shortage of complaints when it was in the government's hands. And who knows, maybe the private sector will be more responsive to public comments than the ministry was.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Occupational therapy is a type of healthcare that helps solve the problems that interfere with a person's ability to do things that are important to them. Let us return to the archives to learn how OT can improve a person's quality of life.
Lorne Handspiker has been able to maintain a good deal of the independence he values so much with the help of occupational therapy. His doorways have been widened to accommodate his wheelchair, and his bathroom has been rigged so he can wheel into the room, climb onto a special chair, and take a shower. Handspiker also knows his way around the kitchen surprisingly well. With the help of some inventive devices, he can still prepare and serve simple meals. At the stove, a pot handle holder attached to the stovetop stabilizes the saucepan for stirring. And when it comes to the everyday task of peeling potatoes, a special board fitted with 3 sharp prongs holds the vegetable in place. When it's time to eat, a placemat made from an unusually sticky material keeps the plate from slipping on the table. And the ingenuity doesn't stop there. Handspiker can even tie his own shoelaces using a unique one-handed method. Occupational therapy has made it possible for Handspiker to live a fairly independent life, and that's something that has always mattered a lot.
I've always been independent, a stubborn old cuss, you know, and I always got along all right. I don't like to ask people for things that I could get myself.
For Flossie Lambley, occupational therapy has meant relief from the pain of the chronic arthritis that has plagued her all her life. Flossie has been fitted with a variety of different splints she can put on when the pain gets to be too much.
And just rest the wrist. See that the wrist is very, very painful, and putting these splints on like that holds it still and keeps it from moving. Before I got these splints, I took a small magazine, just about a 5-page little advertising magazine, and folded it up and put it on my hand, and I wrapped a bandage around it and found that helped, you know. So the girls told me about this and they made me this one. So
other useful aids like this long shoehorn make life a little easier. And then there's Flossie's favorite device, a long-handled picker-upper of sorts.
It's very hard for me to stoop over and to reach the floor, and because of my knees. And if you just drop anything on the floor like that, and it's difficult to pick up, you can just use this, and no matter what it is, you can pick it up. See how easy it is. And this has been the greatest thing. I've got more use out of that than anything the girls have given me.
Like the elephants she loves to collect, Flossie has a hardy constitution that has kept her full of life into her 80s. With the help of occupational therapy, Flossie is better able to handle the pain in her arm and hand. Small chores are made a little easier, and she has a greater sense of self-sufficiency. The scope of occupational therapy is broad, since it addresses such a wide variety of disabling problems.
There's a large job market out there right now, everything from private practice to working within hospitals or institutions. And the only training institute in BC right now is at UBC, and it's a combined program with the School of Physiotherapy there, and it's a 4-year bachelor's program. And then the next closest school is, of course, Alberta, with the University of Alberta grads.
One of the areas requiring specialized skills is pediatric occupational therapy. At child development centers throughout the province, therapists work on the child's motor and perceptual development, along with teaching daily living skills like feeding, dressing, and hygiene.
Pediatric OT, you work an awful lot with the parents because, of course, we only see them half an hour or 2 hours a week, whatever we can fit into our schedule, depending on their needs. So a lot of OT is teaching the parents what they can do at home. And the principle of treatment is to take normal development and how a child would normally develop and look at where this child may have a gap, and think of games or functional play activities or exercises which would help the child catch up.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Children spend their days playing and exploring the world around them, which is important for learning how to interact with others and developing independent life skills. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to discover how occupational therapy helped children reach their potential.
Katie Bernard has been working with an occupational therapist for most of her 4 years. She was born with low muscle tone and eyes that work independently of each other. So her occupational therapist, Liz Hawes, works on things like Katie's eye-hand coordination using a variety of games and exercises.
Now, when children develop, they draw various figures at various times. First, they start with the vertical and horizontal line. Okay, Katie, let's hold that pencil like that, okay? Let's draw this line down here at on the piece of paper, okay? You draw this down here, and if you look at Katie's grasp, it is not a very functional grasp. She has a hard time holding a pencil in an appropriate position. So what I do is I try and use a tripod grip, which is this little thing on the pencil, and I also do hand over hand with her, and then let her move the pencil. Katie, let's look at the line. Can you draw that line?
Yeah.
Okay, draw it. That's a girl. Good for you. Now, can you draw this line down here? Okay, and after the vertical and horizontal line comes the circle, and Katie can draw her circle already. Go ahead, Katie. Good for you.
Liz then moves Katie on to more difficult figures, challenging her to stretch her abilities to their maximum, stopping at the point where Katie has the most difficulty.
Because Katie's eyes don't work like the rest of ours, she tries really hard to compensate. The glasses help her a little bit, but they don't completely alleviate the problem. So she compensates the best she can, and she's done really well. Haven't you, Katie?
One of Katie's accomplishments during her sessions at the Terrace Child Development Center has been learning how to use a pair of scissors, something she was once unable to do.
That's a girl. Good for you. On the line, Katie. Stay on the line. Good for you. So Katie is fairly stable. She can almost stay on the line completely from one end to the other, whereas previously she was not able to do that.
Other exercises include connecting the dots on a picture and then coloring the drawing. All the exercises are used as a measure of Katie's development, and at the same time, they're fun to do.
How kids develop with color, they start with usually one color and color in all sorts of directions, and then they work to gradually coloring in the lines and using various colors. And you will always notice Katie's pencil grip. She tends to use various pencil grips, but one thing that's nice that we look at too is if you're using one hand or both hands to draw or print, and Katie is right hand dominant, because that also affects reading and writing later on. Good. Katie also works on copying the designs and forms shown her by Liz. This helps develop a skill which later translates into the ability to copy other forms, such as letters. Liz also works on helping Katie compensate for the fact that she was born with low muscle tone. As a result, when she walks, her arches tend to flatten. So what I've done for Katie is made her some soft insoles with a little bit of support, extra support in the arch to help support the foot, so that as she's developing, her foot develops appropriately and she walks on a stable base. And you can see that because of the arches that her foot in the back is kind of curving to one side, and that makes a real difference as she's developing. Like Katie, Justin Vogt comes regularly to the Child Development Center. Justin was born with paralysis on the right side of his body and works with therapist Marg Dedeluc on developing balance and leg and arm strength. Marg is trying to get Justin to use his right hand by playing games designed to steer him away from the tendency to use his stronger left hand.
Good. Okay, here's a blue one way up here. Take it with your right hand. Good reaching. Beautiful.
In addition to the games and fun exercises like banging the cymbals and playing the xylophone, Justin has also been fitted with special plastic splints to help support his weak hand and foot.
And he has a nice splint that holds his wrist from dropping down, because there's a tendency for the wrist to drop down in the splint.
Justin also has a plastic splint for his right foot.
What happens is he has like a drop foot where the foot goes down and he's up onto his toes for walking. So this splint just fits onto his foot. It holds the arch nicely, so he's got a nice arch support. And it means when he's walking that he puts his foot flat down onto the floor and then can push off for walking and not being up onto his toes.
Fortunately, much of the problem with Justin's foot can be corrected by surgery.
They're going to lengthen the heel cord surgically at the back, and then they're going to transplant the tendon on the front here so that there's more strength, and he'll be able to then pull his toes up even better. He's got some active movement, and what we're going to do is enhance it with the surgery.
Many techniques are used in helping people of all ages reach their fullest functional capacity. Each person's treatment program is based on need, whether it be through adapting the home by removing barriers, by providing mobility aids like wheelchairs, or aids to daily living like the kitchen devices, as well as helping deal with emotional and social changes that result from a health problem. Occupational therapy has proven invaluable to those who need to learn new skills in order to live independently. The end result is a greater sense of emotional security and self-confidence, especially important for older people who want to remain active and in their own homes. And for children with disabilities, occupational therapy provides opportunities to develop to their full potential.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.